The night was cold and quiet when the loud crash shook. The forest, the trees whispered, and the animals ran. The human man named Elias looked up from his fire. Something had fallen from the sky. Not far from his cabin, he grabbed his jacket, picked up his flashlight, and walked into the darkness, guided by the faint smoke in the air and the strange blue light blinking in the distance. As Elias stepped over broken branches and snow, he saw a metallic pod half buried in the ground, its surface glowing faintly with heat, steam hissing from its side. He moved closer carefully, and then he heard a soft sound, like breathing or maybe crying. He pulled open the hatch, using all his strength. And there she was, an alien woman, tall and injured. Her skin pale violet, her eyes glowing dim like fading stars. Her body was larger than his, and wrapped in a strange cloth, soaked in blood. She looked at him with fear, tried to speak in her language, but failed. She coughed and shook her head, and then whispered in broken English, "I am not breeding material. Leave me here, please." Elias blinked, not understanding her words fully, but understanding one thing: she needed help. He reached out slowly, showing her he had no weapon. He said softly, "I will help. You are safe." She did not fight as he picked her up. She was heavy, but not as much as he expected. Her body was long and wide, but she felt light, like bones of a bird. She closed her eyes as he carried her through the snow back to his cabin inside. He placed her on the soft blanket near the fire. He wrapped her wounds with cloth. He boiled water and gave her soup. She refused at first, but her hands trembled and her stomach growled loudly. She finally took it, her fingers shaking. That night, she stayed silent, sitting by the fire, her eyes never resting, her body curled like a creature that expected to be struck every moment. Elias did not ask questions. He only made sure she was warm and safe. In the morning, he saw her looking at herself in the mirror, her eyes filled with pain. She whispered again in a voice cracked and tired, "Too big, too wide, wrong shape. Not for love, not for breeding. I was cast away, my ship dumped me." Elias felt a chill, but not from the cold. He stepped closer and said kindly, "You are not broken, you are not trash. I do not know your people, but here you are, a guest, and no one throws away." A guest. She looked at him as if she had never heard those words before. Her eyes welled up, but she turned away quickly, hiding her face. Her shoulders shook, but no sound came out that day. He taught her how to use the wooden spoon, how to open the stove, how to pour water from the kettle. She learned fast, but flinched whenever he moved too quickly. Her body always tense, as if bracing for pain. That evening, as the snow fell softly outside, Elias made more soup. She helped stir it with both hands, careful not to drop the spoon, her long fingers moving slowly like she had never cooked before. She sat by the fire again, wrapped in a thick blanket, her eyes watching the flames flicker. Elias sat beside her, not touching, not speaking too much, just letting the silence fill the space between them. Then she whispered softly, almost like a dream, "My name is Ravina. In my world they said my kind should not exist. My body too big for harmony, my voice too loud for quiet. I am a defect." Elias looked at her and said with no hesitation, "In my world, we are all different. Some big, some small, some quiet, some loud, but we all have a place. Maybe you were just born in the wrong world, but you are in mine now. And in mine, you are not a defect. You are just Ravina." Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her chest, and for a moment it seemed she wanted to say more, but she stayed quiet, letting his words settle into her heart. Later that night, she fell asleep by the fire. Her large form curled gently on the floor, her hand still holding the blanket. Elias watched her for a while, then smiled to himself and whispered, "Good night, Ravine." Outside, the snow kept falling. The wind howled softly through the trees. But inside the cabin, the fire kept burning warm and bright, and for the first time in years, both the human and the alien slept without fear. The night was deep and dark, the cabin warm and silent, except for the crackle of fire. Ravina opened her eyes slowly, her breath steady, her body still sore, but better than before, she looked at the man sleeping in a chair near her. The door, his head tilted, his arms crossed, a soft sound from his lips like a dream escaping his chest. She sat up quietly, her thoughts racing, her heart pounding against her ribs like drums. She looked around, saw the coat on the wall, the boots near the fire, the old wooden shelves filled with food and tools and books, all human, all strange, all so come her. Fingers gripped the edge of the blanket as she stood up, her legs shaking, her body heavy. She took a step, then another, her breath fast. The door was just a few feet away. She touched the handle, her hand cold and trembling. With one quick pull, she opened the door and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a wave, the snow thick and deep, the trees tall and silent, the wind biting at her skin. She tried to walk, but her knees buckled, her body collapsed into the snow with a heavy thud, her arms unable to hold her weight. She gasped, tried to crawl, her arms sinking into the snow, her breath forming clouds in the air, her body no longer listening to her, her mind screaming to move, to run, to leave this planet, this cabin, this human butt. Then she heard its footsteps behind her, boots crunching in the snow, hands lifting her carefully, strong and gentle. The human voice, soft but firm. "Ravina, what are you doing? You are not ready. Come back inside, please." She wanted to shout, wanted to tell him to let her go, but her voice failed her, her mouth frozen, her teeth shaking. He carried her back, step by step, his breath near her ear, warm and steady. He laid her down near the fire again, covered her with a thick blanket again, sat beside her. Again she turned her face away, but he spoke quietly. "You do not have to run. You are safe here. I will not hurt you. I promise." She closed her eyes, tight, her throat burning. "I am not safe anywhere. My kind does not want me. Your kind should fear me. I do not belong," he replied after a pause. "Then let this place be a place with no kind, no rules, just two people trying to survive, trying to understand each other." Fire popped as a log broke in half, the flames reaching higher for a moment, then settling back down like her breath, like her heart trying to come morning. Light touched the edge of the window, the snow outside still falling, but softer now. Ravina sat near the table, her back straight, her hands folded. Elias placed a wooden bowl of hot soup in front of her. She nodded, took it slowly. They ate in silence at first. Then she asked softly, "Why did you help me? You do not know me?" He looked at her, his eyes kind. "You needed help, that was enough. But what if I had harmed you? Then I would have tried to help anyway. Maybe that would have changed your mind." She stared at him, not understanding, not trusting, but something in his eyes made her think of warm things, of gentle voices, of safety. She looked down at her hands, then at his smaller but strong, worn from worksheet, reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his knuckles, her voice barely a whisper. "My people say I am too large, too loud, too much for any bond. I was told no one would ever want me, that I am a waste." He looked at her without flinching and said, "You are not a waste, not to me, not here's." Rose again in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough. Her heart already heavy. She would not break again, not yet, not in front of him. Later, he showed her how to use the kettle, how to add wood to the fire, how to read the letters in his book. She struggled, but he was patient, always smiling, always kind. Night she watched the snow fall through the window, her thoughts drifting, her heart confused, her body still sore but lighter, as if his words had peeled away a layer of pain. She whispered to the window, to herself, maybe to him, "I do not know what you see when you look at me, but I have never felt seen before." He answered from his chair, "I see someone strong, someone hurt, someone trying to heal. I see someone who deserves peace." The wind outside slowed the snow, stopped, the stars peeked through the clouds for the first time in days. The forest breathed quietly. And so did she. She lay down again, wrapped in the same blanket, her eyes heavy, but her mind clearer. She was not safe, yet not fully healed, but she was not alone. Not anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for one more night. The mirror stood tall in the corner of the cabin, old and cracked, but still showing truth. Ravina stood before it, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes staring at her reflection, her hands slowly pulling the cloth away. Her breath shallow, her thoughts sharp. Like glass, she looked at her arms thick and scarred, her shoulders wide, her chest heavy, her hips large, her skin not smooth, not perfect. Her legs shaped like they never fit in her own world, and her stomach with faint lines from burns and bruises. And memories she tried to forget. The cold air touched her skin, but she did not move, her eyes full of shame, her mind whispering the old words again. Too big, too wide, not fit, not good enough, not for love, not for anything. Behind her, the door creaked. Elias stepped in, his arms holding firewood, his face surprised when he saw her standing so still in front of the mirror. His mouth opened, but he said nothing, just set the wood down and waited. She did not turn. She did not cover herself, her voice soft and shaking. This is what I am. This is what they told me would make others turn away. Walk slowly to her side, not touching, not speaking, yet his eyes meeting hers in the mirror, calm and kind. No fear, no disgust, only warm through. See a monster. She whispered, but I see someone who survived, someone who still stands, someone who did not break even when thrown away. He replied in a voice low and steady. She looked down, her hands gripping the blanket again, pulling it around her body like armor. Her back turning away from the mirror, her shoulders rising with quiet sobs. He stepped closer, his voice softer. You are not the story they told you, not the label they gave, not the weight they measured you with. She sat on the bed, her arms wrapped around herself, her head bowed, her voice nearly lost. I was part of a program designed to create perfect pairs. Every measurement, every angle had to fit. I failed. I was rejected, put in lower ranks, assigned to machines, never chosen, never touched, never wanted. Leah sat on the floor near her, not too close but not far either. His legs crossed, his hands resting on his knees. His gaze fixed on her with care. In my world, he said, people fall in love for strange reasons. Sometimes it is a smile or a laugh, or the way someone listens, or the way they cry when they see kindness. Sometimes it has nothing to do with shape or size or rules. She looked at him, eyes red from tears, breathing slow and uneven. Do you really believe that? He nodded slowly. I do, because I have seen it, and because I feel it now. With Yosh blinked, unsure what he meant, her heart skipping, something unfamiliar rising inside her, something like fear, but softer, something like hope, but heavy. He stood and offered his hand gently, without pressure, without force, just an open hand waiting for hers. She reached after a moment, her fingers trembling as they met his touch warm, steady, grounding her, pulling her back from the cliff her thoughts had created. He helped her stand, guided her to the fire, wrapped another blanket around her shoulders, poured warm tea into a wooden cup, handed it to her with both hands. They sat together for hours, speaking little, watching the flames dance, listening to the wind outside and the soft creak of the old wood around the mat. One point she looked at him and asked, what do you see when you look at me? Answered without pause, I see someone who is strong, who is learning to breathe again, who is beautiful in ways your world could never measure. She closed her eyes, her lips parting as if to cry again, but no tears came. Only silence, only warmth, only a moment that felt like healing. Leaned back against the wall, his body tired, his eyes closing slowly, and before sleep took him, he whispered, you belong here, Ravina, even if you cannot see it. Yet she watched him rest, the light from the fire casting gold on his skin, her hand rising to touch her chest, feeling the beat inside it, unsure, confused, afraid, but still there, still beating, still alive. She whispered to the flames, not knowing if he heard, not knowing if it mattered, I want to believe. Youth wind outside carried no storm. The snow had turned to soft flakes, falling like feathers, the forest quiet, the sky clear above the cabin, and, for the first time in her life, Ravina did not feel like an error. She felt like a story just beginning. The morning sun pushed through the window, the golden light warming the edge of the bed, where Ravina still lay wrapped in soft blankets, her eyes slowly opened, not in fear, but in peace, her ears catching the gentle sound of movement in the kitchen, Elias humming something she did not know. Yet it calmed her chest like music made from safety. She sat up slowly, feeling the wooden floor beneath her feet. Strong and real, she walked toward the sound, her large frame careful in the small space, her presence filling the cabin like wind fills sails. Unsure of direction but full of energy, Louis looked over his shoulder and smiled, his hands busy with something. In a pan, something that smelled strange but good, he nodded toward the chair without speaking. Just that quiet comfort that had become his language. She sat watching the way he moved the way. He worked like he belonged in every second, like he carried time in his fingers. She had never seen someone so ordinary yet feel so important. Breakfast was served with no words. Just a plate pushed gently in front of her, and his own beside it. They ate in silence again, but this silence was not empty. It was full of unspoken trust and small glances that said more than any language could explain. After they cleaned together, her hands awkward with human tools, her fingers bumping into his at times, both of them pretending not to notice the strange spark that flickered when skin touched skin. Later, as she looked outside through the window, something caught her attention. Movement between the trees, fast and sharp shadows that did not belong here. Her heart raced, her body froze, her hand lifted to call Elias, but before she spoke, the knock came. 3 slow knocks on the wooden door, heavy like thunder rolling through her chest. She stepped back, eyes wide, breath caught behind her teeth. Elias walked past her toward the door, his hand raised in a calm motion telling her to stay quiet, stay hidden. He opened the door just enough for voices to slip through, deep voices full of suspicion and curiosity. 3 men in heavy coats holding tools and weapons, not raised but visible, their eyes scanning past Elias into the cabin. He greeted them with calm words, said something about smoke seen from the distance, said everything was fine, said he was alone, just working through the winter alone. Like always, one of the men leaned to the side, tried to see more inside, asked about strange lights, strange sounds. Elias kept his face calm, his body between them and her, his voice never shaking. Gravina crouched behind the bed, her body trembling, not from cold, but from memory, from fear, from the echo of being discovered, from the whisper of being taken again. The men asked more questions, stayed too long, looked too hard, but finally turned and left, their boots crunching through the snow until their sound faded into trees. Elias closed the door, locked it with slow hands, leaned his back against the wood, and let out a breath like he had held the sky on his shoulders. She stood slowly, her knees weak, her voice cracked like dry earth. You lied for me. He looked at her with eyes full of fire and said, I protected you. She walked toward him, unsure of her steps, unsure of her thoughts, unsure if she should feel grateful or guilty or something else, something deeper. Why would you risk yourself for me? She asked, her voice low. Because I want you safe, he said simply, and because no one should have to hide forever. She stared at him, her chest tight, her throat closed, her mind filled with things she had never felt before, things that had no name in her language. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by the fire, watching the flames twist and bend, her thoughts as heavy as her body, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes lost in the dancing light. Elias sat beside her, not too close, not too far, his presence like a mountain, silent and strong. She turned to him finally and said, if they come back, if they take me, what will you do? He did not pause, did not blink. I will stop them. How anyway? I cannot fight them, maybe not, but I can stand between them and you, and sometimes standing is enough. She looked at him, not like before, not like a stranger or a protector, but like something more, like someone who had stepped into her storm and refused to leave. The fire crackled, the wind whispered, the stars outside watched in silence, and something inside her shifted, something Like a door opening, something like walls falling, something like hope being born again. She leaned her head against his shoulder, gently, carefully, and he did not move away. His arms slowly wrapping around her, not in hunger, not in pity, but in warmth. In truth, in quiet defiance of everything her world had told her she could never have owned. In that moment, with the past behind her and danger ahead, she allowed herself to breathe, as if for the very first time. The fire had died down to glowing coals, and shadows danced across the wooden walls. Ravina sat close, her knees pulled to her chest. The blanket around her shoulders warm, but not enough to calm the storm inside her. Elias was asleep in the chair near the window, his head resting on the back, his face soft and peaceful. She watched him for a long time, her thoughts heavy, her heart unsure. She remembered the way he had stood at the door like a shield, the way his voice had stayed calm while hers wanted to scream, the way his eyes had met hers after the danger had passed, full of something she did not understand, yet something she feared and needed both at once. Slowly she rose from the floor, her feet silent on the wood, her body moving like a ghost. Her fingers reached toward him, hesitated, then touched his hair gently, carefully, as if the moment might shatter like thin ice underfoot. "You do not see what I am," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. His eyes opened slowly, but he did not move. He looked at her with sleep still in his gaze, and something else, something that felt like sunrise in winter. "I see you," he said, in a voice rough from sleep, but steady. She pulled her hand back, stepped away, her heart racing, her body trembling. "I should not have done that. I am sorry. I just needed to know if you were real." He stood up, walked to her, not fast, not slow, his hands open, not reaching, just waiting. "You are not alone, Ravina, not anymore. You do not have to be afraid of what you feel." "I am not afraid of what I feel," she replied, her voice sharp but cracked. "I am afraid of what I might want and what I am not allowed to want." "And what do you want to?" "Not be broken, to not be judged, to be wanted, not because I am useful or rare or fit for breeding, but because I am me." He nodded once, then stepped closer until their hands almost touched. "I want that too," he said, "and maybe we can give that to each other." She looked at him, her eyes wide, her body still, her breath caught in her chest. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "Neither are youth." Stood there for a moment in silence, wrapped in something neither could name, something warm and deep, fragile. Later that day, Elias showed her how to use the radio, how to tune the dial, how to listen for voices among the static. She sat beside him, her large fingers clumsy on the knobs, but his hand guided hers. Slowly, patiently, without judgment, she heard voices from far places, some in languages she did not know, some crying, some laughing, some reading numbers like spells in the wind. She listened with her eyes closed and imagined the world beyond the snow dew. "You ever feel lonely here?" she asked. "Yes, but not when you were near." That made her smile, not wide, not bright, but soft like snow falling on still water. When the sun began to set, Elias cooked again. Ravina helped this time, her hands learning her movements, slow but steady. They moved around the kitchen together, like pieces of the same story. After dinner, they sat by the fire. Again, not talking much, just sitting close, not touching yet, not apart. She spoke first, after a long while. "Elias, do you ever wonder what would happen if you let yourself care too?" "My child, the time," he answered. "Do you think it is worth it? I think it is the only thing that makes life more than just surviving." She turned her head toward him, her eyes searching his face for doubt, for fear, but found none. She reached out slowly, unsure, afraid. Her hand touched his gently, her fingers curling around his. Without thinking, he looked down at their hands, then back at her, his voice soft. "Is this okay?" She nodded slowly, her throat tight, her voice lost, but her eyes said yes. They stayed like that for a long time, the fire burning low, the snow outside falling again, the world holding its breath as something new began to grow between two souls who never thought they would find such warmth in such cold. Ravina leaned closer until her head rested against his shoulder, her body relaxing for the first time in years, her heart beating not from fear, but from something softer. I do not know what will happen, she whispered. Neither do I, he replied, but I am here, and I am not leaving. She closed her eyes, breathed in his scent, the scent of wood and warmth and kindness, and for the first time in her life, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she was not too big to be held, not too wrong to be loved, not too broken to begin again. The storm came without warning. The sky turned gray, and the wind howled through the forest like a wild beast, angry and loud. The trees bent under the force. The snow came heavy and fast, burying paths and hiding all signs of life inside the cabin. The fire struggled to stay alive, the windows rattled, and the cold slipped through every crack. Elias moved quickly, adding wood to the flames, closing shutters, checking supplies, while Ravina stood by the door, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. She had never seen such weather on this planet. Her world had heat and dust, not this endless white, this silence wrapped in fury. She watched Elias move, calm but alert, his every step practiced, his every breath measured. Do storms like this come often, she asked, her voice soft but firm. Sometimes, he replied, especially this deep in the woods. It might last a day, maybe two. We will stay warm if we keep the fire going. She nodded but did not sit, her body tense, her thoughts spinning faster than the wind outside. Elias finished his tasks and turned to her. You okay? Do not like feeling trapped, she said. I do not like small spaces or long silences. I do not like not knowing what comes next. Walked over, placed a thick blanket on her shoulders, and said, then let us make this space less small, this silence less heavy. How by sharing it together? They sat on the floor near the fire, close enough to feel each other's warmth, but not touching. Ravina looked at the flames dancing between them, their light flickering on the walls like memories she had not chosen to keep. Do you know what it means to be labeled unfit? She asked suddenly, her voice trembling slightly. He shook his head. Not really, but I can imagine it hurts. It does. She said, they gave me tests when I was young, measured every part of me, judged every movement, every thought, every dream, and when I failed, I was told I would never bond, never breed, never belong. Elias looked at her, his eyes steady, his voice gentle. They were wrong. She laughed, bitter and sharp. How would you know? Because I see you here. I see how you move, how you care, how you learn, how you feel. You are not a failure. You are alive and strong and beautiful. Her breath caught the words, hitting her like soft stones. Heavy but not painful, shaping her from within. She turned her face toward him, her eyes wet, her lips slightly parted. Do you really believe that? Yes, I do. The fire popped. A log collapsed in the center, sending sparks into the air. They watched in silence until the moment passed, until her heart stopped racing. Suddenly, the wind outside knocked something hard against the roof, a loud crash that made them both jump. Elias ran to check. The ceiling water was dripping near the corner, a hole torn open by a broken branch. We need to move the blankets and food, he said, fast and serious. Before they get wet, they work together, moving things away from the leak, placing pots to catch water, covering the supplies with cloth, their bodies moving in rhythm, their hands brushing off in their eyes, meeting quickly, then looking away. Once everything was safe, they stood in the middle of the room, wet and cold. Ravina shivered slightly, her body shaking. Elias took her hand without a word and pulled her closer toward the fireplace. Sit here, he said. Remove your outer layers. You are soaked. She hesitated, but obeyed, pulling off her thick coat, her damp shirt, her heavy boots, left with only a thin tunic beneath. You too, she said, motioning to his soaked clothes. He nodded and pulled off his jacket and shirt, revealing his lean frame marked by work and time. They sat together again, this time much closer. Their shoulders touching their knees almost aligned the warmth of the fire, and their skin pushing back the cold. Ravina looked at him, her voice softer than she meant I used to dream of. Warmth, not just of heat, but of feeling safe in someone's presence, of being held without judgment, of being touched with care. He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. Then, without words, he reached out slowly, gently touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, waited for her to lean in. She did. Their lips met, not rushed, not hungry, but full of meaning, full of the silent stories they had shared, full of pain and healing and quiet hope. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer empty, it was full of everything that mattered. She rested her head against his shoulder, her fingers finding his hand, her voice a whisper. I never thought I would be wanted like this. You, Ari said. More than you, no. And in that cabin in the heart of a storm, with snow covering the world and fire lighting their souls, they found something that neither science nor war nor rejection could erase. Something real, something human, something they had both thought lost forever. The morning was quiet. The storm had passed. The snow outside lay untouched, like a soft white ocean stretching beyond the trees. The wind, gentle now, no longer wild, no longer angry. The world resting in silence. Inside the cabin, Ravina stood by the window, her hands resting on the wood, her breath fogging the glass, her eyes watching the forest as if waiting for something or someone, her body still wrapped in the same blanket. Her mind anything but still. Lias was behind her, his hands working with wood carving, something small, something that helped him think, helped him feel. He glanced at her often, not with worry, but with curiosity and care. She had been silent all morning, barely touching her tea, barely answering his words. Something different lived in her now, something quiet and strange and unknown. Then she turned slowly, her hands moving to her stomach, her eyes meeting his with confusion and fear and wonder. Something is wrong, she whispered, or maybe something is right, I do not know. He stood quickly, walked to her, his hands ready but gentle, his voice calm. Tell me, what do you feel? She looked down, then back at him, her voice trembling. I feel something inside, something moving, something alive. He did not speak at first, his mind racing, but his face soft, his heart beating with hers. You saying what I think you are. I think I am pregnant, Elias. I think I am carrying life. His breath caught his hands, reaching for hers, pulling them into his chest, holding them close, not because he had answers, but because he wanted to share the weight of her words. But I cannot be, she continued, her voice breaking. My kind, said my body was wrong, said I was not built for this, said I could not make life. He smiled slowly, like sunlight rising over frost. Maybe they were wrong about everything. Maybe you were never broken. Maybe you were never the problem. She fell into his arms, shaking not from fear, but from release from the years of rejection, the years of silence, the years of believing she was nothing. He held her tighter than ever before, his hand moving gently across her back, his lips resting near her temple, his voice a quiet echo. You are more than enough, Ravina, more than anyone ever saw, more than I ever dreamed I would find. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, wrapped in the moment, wrapped in the fragile but growing truth that something new had begun, something pure and unstoppable. Later, they sat on the floor together, her back against the wall, his head on her shoulder, the fire dancing again on the hearth, their hands linked, their bodies close. What will happen now? She asked softly. We will figure it out, one step at a time. We will make a plan. We will prepare. We will protect what we have made. She looked at him, her eyes filled with both joy and doubt. I am scared, Elias. I do not know how to be a mother. I do not know what kind of child this will be. Not fully alien, not fully human. He touched her face gently, his fingers brushing her cheek. Then the edge of her lips, then the side of her neck. That child will be made from love, from survival, from two people who chose each other in a world that never made it easy. Tears slipped from her eyes. But she smiled, her chest rising with something warm. Something deep, something she could finally call happiness, outside. The sky began to clear, the first light of sun shining through the trees. Painting golden lines across the snow, the birds slowly returning the forest, waking from its long, cold sleep. They stepped outside together, hand in hand, her steps slow, his steady, her body still heavy, but her heart finally light. She looked at the trees, at the sky, at the endless space around them, and whispered, maybe this world is not so bad. Maybe I can belong here. Maybe I already do. He turned to her, his eyes full of wonder and love and pride. You belong here more than anyone. Ravina, you are the strongest person I know. She looked down at her belly, her hand resting there, feeling the smallest flutter, like a breath, like a heartbeat, like a promise. This life, she said softly, this tiny spark, it changes everything. Yes, it does, and I would not change it for anything. They walked into the snow together, side by side, not knowing what the future would hold, not knowing what dangers might come, but sure of one thing, they would face it all as one. They alien once called too big, too broken, too wrong had found a home in a human heart, and in that heart she had planted something greater than fear, greater than rejection, something that would grow stronger every day as the snow melted and the seasons changed and the world turned once more. Ravina and Elias held on to each other, held on to hope, held on to love, not because they were perfect, not because they were chosen, but because they chose each other, and that choice made them everything they were told they could never be.